Okay, welcome everybody to, I think it's week 3 now of STIR Crazy Month, a full month where the team here at Vacation Rental Former Business School, we're helping to promote safety, sustainability, trust, insurance, and regulations. And this week is Insurance Week. And we have to give a huge thank you to one of our guests here today, actually, Nick Massey from Proper Insurance and his team from Proper, who have been incredible in supporting this event through the month of February. And we do plan to do this every year. And as part of this, we are just trying to shed a wider light on some of the subjects that just are not really covered at the conferences. Some of these subjects that are really important to the foundation of your business. And if you don't get these things right, can shatter your business overnight. And especially insurance. And Heather has some great stories from her time as a property manager, and I'll turn it over to her in just one second. But before we get going, I'm just going to pop up a quick poll here, which will give you just the opportunity just to let us know what kind of business you have, how many employees. It just gives us a little bit of an idea of who we're speaking to, so we can kind of tailor some of the content today to you, to the people who are attending live. And if you're watching the recording on this, you can always join our socials and connect with these incredible people and their incredible businesses and ask them questions directly, because they are always here to help. And that's why they're so kind enough to give up their time today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Heather and we'll kick off.
I just sent a little note to Mike to say, introduce yourself.
Oh. Well, I mean, we're week 3 now. I mean, anybody who's here should know me. But yes, I'm Mike Bayer, CEO and co-founder of the Vacation Rental Former Business School. The sidekick to Heather Bayer, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, who's also my mum, and also the host of the Vacation Rental Success podcast, which hopefully you will listen to, because we cover topics like this every single week. So, Heather, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. This has been a great month so far. Really enjoying it. I've learned so much from the podcast, from the panels, and from the blog posts I've been reading. And while there aren't a lot of people attending this, we are going to be sharing a lot of what we're talking about with the much wider audience, because I think it's so important that we get this message out. And every message from every week that we've done, message from safety, from trust, from insurance, from regulations, and from sustainability, because this is so important. Nick Massey, that I'm going to pass this over to introduce in a moment, was the guest on my podcast yesterday. Had some great feedback about that podcast and the information that he shared on there. Let's I'm just going to turn it over and ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So Nick, you go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. My name is Nick Massey. I'm the director of sales with Proper Insurance. I've been with Proper since ultimately pretty much the beginning. Company was founded in 2014. I joined the team early 2016 and have been here ever since. Kind of the big focus is folks here, you've only been around since 2014, but our ownership group really more or less built and designed what is now known as modern hospitality policies for the traditional kind of boutique inns, bed and breakfasts, hotels, motels around the United States back in the late 80s, early 90s. So coming from a lot of experience in different realms of hospitality through our expertise, and me personally working in various markets from marine custom bonds and importing insurance, retail insurance, as well as estate planning for farmers and ranchers. And then obviously the last 8 years, specifically in the vacation rental space. So I like to think I bring a pretty wide scope of knowledge and information from top to bottom on asset protection.
That's great. Thanks, Nick. Let's turn it over to Noga Barpal from Fay Insurance. It's lovely to have you here, Noga.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks for having me. As you said, I'm Noga from Fay. We are providing travel insurance to travelers, so it's a little bit of a different spin, against Proper and Superhug that we'll be speaking today, to the benefit of the rental property manager. We're kind of coming from the travelers, being able to protect the traveler's entire trip. And I'll be speaking later today about how that can also impact the short-term rental provider in a positive way, kind of helping mitigate the risks of last-minute cancellations, dealing with burdens of guests having issues along the way, and how we might help kind of take away some of that burden from the providers.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that because I was a property manager for 20 years, and not having a travel insurance product that we could offer during that time was a struggle, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, because I think it's so important that we all encourage guests to buy their travel insurance to help us poor property managers from those difficult conversations that we sometimes have. Andrew
Absolutely.
Bolt from Superhog, thank you so much for joining us. We had Superhog represented in week 1 where we talked about safety. So great to have you here for Insurance Week.
Absolutely brilliant to be here. Thank you, Heather, Mike, for having us here. And your last comment, I guess we're all here to try and make life easier for property managers and hosts and guests and the whole sector. So I'm one of the founders of Superhog. We provide a risk management toolkit to the short-term rental sector. So basically, we really focus on helping hosts and property managers to de-risk their bookings. And I've been working, I guess, in and around the risk management sector for most of the last 20 years, been involved in building a number of insurance businesses across that time, and seen quite a lot of evolution in the sector. The insurance industry is probably not that famous for being kind of fast moving and forward thinking. But actually, I think maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it. I think it's helpful for people to understand what it is in short-term rentals that is a bit difficult for insurers, and actually why businesses like Proper are doing a great job in terms of evolving to provide something that people actually need.
Well, that is great, and I've learnt a lot, as I said, over this past week about insurance. So after all my years as a property manager, I think I've learned more in this last three or four days, in fact, than I had in that 20 years. And one of those things is that there are different types of policies that are available for short-term rental owners and managers. And let me put this one out to Nick to start with, because we sort of call this the four pillars of property of the business, of any business. So can you just explain what these are and tease these out a little?
Yeah, of course. So one of our big education initiatives for 2024 and moving forward is really getting it out there and classifying that there are different types of insurance for each facet of this business, and not one single one eliminates the need for another. And so from top to bottom, if you're a property manager and you're managing third-party properties, you need to have business insurance for your operation. And that comes in all different shapes and sizes. So you really need to take the time to talk to a broker and consult through that. One of our networks of companies that we have does that. So you can take a look, and you need E&O insurance, you need general liability, professional liability. Maybe you have an office building, so you need property coverage, commercial autos, staff. So now you need work comp and employee benefits and so on and so forth. So those packages can be rather robust. It is not necessarily the most complicated thing to get set up, but it is kind of the more robust factor. Pillar number 2 would be the property owners. All of these assets are owned by somebody, and each one of those individual assets needs to have an annual insurance policy on it. In what we define as the retail marketplace, and it's primarily around the U.S. markets and in the international markets in Europe and Asia and Canada and South America and Central America, insurance and liabilities operate a little bit differently. So I'm not fully ingrained in that, unfortunately, but every asset, regardless of where you are, needs to have its own insurance. Because home insurance has deductibles, you should do security deposits or damage waivers. The OTAs have these as well. We have Superhog on here, who does a facet of that in a supplemental capacity. Damage deposits, in my opinion, are antiquated and really should be using what I classify as Pillar 3, which is a damage waiver type solution, potentially some supplemental liability in there as well. And then number 4 is the travel insurance component. And Most of these OTAs, if you're using those exclusively, do offer that to your guests, and they may or may not buy that. If you are operating as with direct bookings, your own website, or as a property manager, then partnering with companies like Fay on that travel insurance component will really round out these risk management solutions to protect your business from start to finish.
That is great. I'm really interested. You mentioned, Nick, that you've been to short-term rental wealth conference. Andrew, were you there as well?
Actually, I wasn't, but we were represented. Yeah, we had a strong team there who I went last year. Nashville's a pretty fun town, so there are lots of people putting their hand up saying, "Please, can I go?" I gather it was a good conference.
Noga, was anybody from Fay represented there?
No, we weren't, unfortunately.
Okay. I'm really interested because I just talked to Nick about just before we started, and he was saying that the people who came, the attendees, didn't know who's going to be up on stage and what they were going to be talking about, and so there was a room full of people when Nick got up there and said, "I'm talking about risk management." So that was interesting. But what I'd like to know is, what did you hear from the people that were coming to the booth? And Andrew, you probably got this, third party. What were they talking about? What were their pain points that they wanted to talk to you about?
So I'll have a go. So the feedback I've had from the team has been, as Nick has just explained really well, when you are a business and you're maybe running a substantial portfolio that really is a professional entity in itself, actually that market is reasonably well served with kind of robust insurance products. So actually there's the whole range of commercial products that companies need to buy. And actually if that company runs a property which is purely a vacation rental property, again, the insurance market for that is pretty well served. What's interesting at the STIR Wealth conference is there's a lot of people who are starting out and a lot of people who are single unit, maybe 2 unit owners. And that's where I think people have much more of a challenge. And this is where I guess no one's that sympathetic, I don't think, about the insurance industry, but this is where maybe there's a little bit of sympathy, because insurers have spent hundreds of years insuring property on the basis that they kind of go, right, what is it I'm insuring and who am I insuring? And on the basis of that, they get really comfortable. Now, what short-term rentals has done is that's kind of slightly thrown that up in the air, particularly for these kind of what become multi-use properties. So if someone maybe wants to make their own home available for short-term rentals, or they have a holiday home that they want to use themselves, so that's one load of usage, and they also want to make some revenue from it. So insurers are then kind of scratching their head, or at least certainly 10, 12 years ago, they were really scratching their heads going, hang on, we don't quite know how to deal with this, because the property may be the same, but the use is different. It used to be just your home or your holiday home. And now actually you've got people paying, in some cases, really good money to come and stay in the house. And what are they going to use the house for? And in fact, who are these people? We got comfortable with you, but who are these guys who are going to come and stay in the property? So I think that's and the STR Wealth Conference is quite focused on those smaller kind of 1 to 5 unit owners. And actually, I think that's probably the guys who have the biggest challenge.
Yeah, Nick, what were you hearing from people stopping by the booth?
Yeah, it was a wide variety for sure. It really solidified after we were able to talk, and like I had mentioned, because they didn't announce who was coming on, it's kind of like one of those, oh, gotcha. Like now you're going to listen to what I have to say, which was great. And Humphrey from Superhog went on right after me. So it was kind of a 1-2 punch around risk management with 2 presentations back to back. But what we really got was, to echo what Andrew said, was, really, you don't know what you don't know. And so breaking down the differences, plenty of folks who came up to us who are newer in the industry who said, well, I felt just so comfortable with the OTA cover. Like, I thought they had my back. It's like, at the end of the day, it's in my opinion, what I've seen is it's a 50-50 shot. They might respond, they might not, right? You don't have any control over that insurance policy. So it's important to navigate that yourself and make sure you have your own products in place. A lot of folks were, kind of blind to the fact from agents who, work in the insurance industry selling an annual product like I do, just telling people they'll be fine. And most folks come into this whole thing new saying, well, I own a home, so I need homeowners insurance. And they kind of stop there and they don't really go deeper into it. So one thing that was really great was folks would come up and show us their online listing and also pull up their insurance policy, which was great for us to do live in person and show them and just go straight down to the occupancy definition in the policy, which most folks don't know. And it's defining the occupancy as residential premises. The insurance company thinks you live there and you're there the whole time. There's somebody there to shut off the water. There's somebody there to make sure the stove's not on. They're, preventing all these risks, and a responsible property owner is not going to damage their own property, right? So again, echoing to what Andrew said, you have all these strangers, if you will, coming in and out of your property, and that elevates the property risk and the liability risk substantially, something that traditional insurance markets are not currently underwriting for. So I feel like it was a big eye-opener for a lot of folks, and what we, I'm sure the three of us here on this panel continue to try and get out there through educational platforms like this, that you don't know what you don't know, and you need to be asking the right questions, and you need to really dive into your insurance policy with a respectable and knowledgeable enterprise that understands this risk to help show you how contracts work in the insurance industry. And if they think it's your primary home and they're underwriting as a primary home and it's not, then you run the risk of claim denials.
Yeah, I'm always reflecting back on my experience, and as a property manager, we have those responsibilities. You have those responsibilities to ensure that your homeowners carry the right insurance so that if a claim comes, everybody gets hit by it. As you know, I've told my story enough that we were hit with a $1 million lawsuit, and we were very fortunate. Well, it was more through planning and strategy that we got through this without too much trouble, because as a property manager, we had good insurance, and our homeowner also had insurance. What we didn't have, and once again, going over to Nick, I think to explain the additional insured on a homeowner's policy, because I was never, until we spoke the other day, I was never really sure what that actually meant. And you said on the podcast that was essential.
Yeah, the additional insured component is, if you're newer to the industry, from a management perspective, it's not something you're really that tuned into, because you're focused on building your business, getting more folks into your portfolio, managing more properties, generating more revenue. But if you have 500 properties right now and you're not checking certificates of property owners to make sure you're additional insured, then this is going to be quite the project to get figured out. If you're newer to the industry and you're building this portfolio of property management, it's a lot easier to navigate. So basically, when we look at pillar number one, going back to that with property manager insurance, in a lot of cases, those contracts are not extending coverage to your property owners, because they're there to protect you and your business and what you're doing there and your responsibilities. However, every single time a homeowner of ours has the unfortunate circumstance of being named in a lawsuit, if they have third-party management, that manager is also named in the lawsuit. So where does that gap in protection come from? That gap is filled by making sure your property owners are naming you as additional insured on their home policy. And if you're navigating this effectively, and one, your contract language with the homeowner should say, you need to carry $1 million in insurance before any umbrellas, and I need to be named as additional insured, you shouldn't put that property online until you've acquired that certificate. Then from there, if something does happen and you have the unfortunate circumstance like what you had, Heather, you have the phone number to the homeowner's insured to call. And you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call them and say, hey, we have a situation. We need to get you documentation on this. If you're not additionally insured and your policy has those limitations from a property management standpoint, you run the risk of not having any protection in certain liability situations, especially an accident that falls outside your scope of responsibility as the manager. So I just cannot hone on it enough. It's something we've been preaching since day one of the company to property managers. Is like, you have got to be collecting certificates and seeing that you're additional insured. Now, to kind of broaden this point, if you receive a certificate, it's a one-page piece of paper. We call it a COI, Certificate of Insurance. It says your insured's name, their property address, the amount of liability coverage. But down on the bottom left-hand corner, if it says additional interest, that is wrong. Additional interest does not provide coverage to you managing the property. It simply notifies you if they ever cancel the coverage, right? So you want to see additional insured, because that means you have policy protection under their liability, and that's extremely, extremely important.
That is such great information. And you said to you the other day, I wish I'd known this years ago. I mean, we got through ours because it turned out to be there was no substance to the claim, but it still took 2 years, and we was very glad that we had good insurance. I want to go over to Noga here because just to talk about travel insurance for a little bit, because as a property manager, we had, as a property manager, we have two clients. We have, on the one hand, our owners, and on the other hand, our guests. And we talk a lot about insurance to our owners, but we really do need to help our guests to choose the right insurance, or just, we need to help our guests make sure that they're preparing for their vacation in the best possible way. And for me, I think helping them to get travel insurance is one of the best possible ways. How do you suggest to homeowners and managers, Noga, that they explain to their guests why this is so important?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different elements, as I alluded to at the beginning of the webinar. So the first situation is cancellation policies, right? We're all trying to provide excellent customer service, and reviews is a very important part of the business as well. And so if you are trying to uphold a cancellation policy that is safe for your business, for your property, while providing good customer service, there's this gap sometimes when a guest life happens, right? Someone gets COVID, someone, has a death in the family and can't travel. All of those situations would cause the property manager to want to allow the cancellation last minute. But this is really creating a situation where you are between a rock and a hard place, right? So this is where travel insurance kind of bridges that gap and allows you to uphold stricter cancellation policies while allowing the guest to cancel and get refunds through the insurance itself. So it is a different concept, and that brings to your question of kind of how are you educating on this. So as Nick alluded to, a lot of OTAs offer that within the booking process. You see the attachment rate is quite high because guests, just as you do with, I'm sure we've all done it, we've booked an airline, a flight online, and we've checked that box to insure the trip. We're not always sure what we're getting with that insurance, and this applies also to on the hospitality side. That's something that Faye is trying to address. I think we do it very well in being more transparent of what you are getting with your insurance. So that's one thing in terms of property managers. You're not an insurance provider. You don't really know what that means. You do want the provider that you're offering to be transparent and clear to the guests so they understand what they're getting. But at the end of the day, adding it onto the stay is a great way of getting the customer to, first of all, even understand, oh, maybe I should have travel insurance. That's something that a lot of travelers still don't realize. I think COVID helped people understand what's the risk when you're traveling and you're booking a stay. You and your family want to go on a summer vacation. You're booking an apartment for a month. That could be a substantial investment, right? And being able to ensure that isn't something that travelers always have top of mind. So having it at the booking location is the best. But then we work with our property managers to also be communicating to the guest via their website, via email communications, SMS, etc., to kind of show them the value that this might bring. While again also highlighting that if last minute you need to cancel, unfortunately, we're not able to abide by that. So this is where travel insurance can help protect you. On top of that, we also obviously have other parts of the coverage for health and baggage and things like that. And that goes to, again, to, you know, the property manager wants to provide a really great experience, but it goes far beyond kind of what your expertise is, right? You're trying to make sure that the home, the accommodation is the best it can be. But again, what happens if your guests get sick and they need your help finding a doctor? You want to provide that customer service. You're not really sure how to. So this is where Faye can also come in. And again, that's kind of offered as a whole package during the booking process, but it's not kind of just for the stay itself. So there's a holistic view. Not all travel insurance offers that. So there are some that are going to be focused around cancellations. There's also a policy, cancel for any reason, which you may or may not be familiar with, which is beyond the insurance, being able to, the traveler be able to elect to cancel the stay and again, be able to get the money back, whereas the property manager still gets the money for the booking. So there are different policies within travel insurance that can be more beneficial to the property manager or more beneficial to the traveler. So it really depends on what you're looking for, what type of guests you have, etc.
I want to talk for a second about pets, because accepting a pet into a property, I think covers what all three of you do. You know, there's liability to that. There's potential of damage. And also for the guest, there's the potential that the pet falls sick and what happens with that. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. Just over to Mike for a message.
Yeah, just thank everybody who's submitting questions, and just keep them coming. We will get to all the questions at the end of the live panel in the last 10-15 minutes. I also just wanted to quickly share with everybody the poll data. So we do have a 70-30 split, 70% managed properties for others, with 30% single property owners, which is typically what we're seeing across the board for STIR Crazy Month. And just the team sizes. So we do have, you know, a property management company with 10 to 19 staff, and everybody else is like 1 to 4. So that gives everybody a little bit of an idea of our audience here who are live on the call today. But please keep the questions coming, and I'll stack those up, and we'll get to those at the end. So Heather, back to you.
Yes. So back to pets. And you know, I'm a pet lover. I had properties, multiple properties that accepted pets. There were issues. We had guests who had their pets falling ill and requiring attention, and that was a struggle because of some issues with veterinaries in our particular area. We had pets that damaged the property. We had guests with pets that bit the next door neighbor. So really, this covers everything. I'm going to start with Andrew and damage waivers. How does this impact, you know, the whole issue with pets, and maybe talk about damage waivers in the broader sense as well?
Your pet, you're right that I too am a host, and I'm also a multiple pet owner. And I think we allow people to come and stay in one of our 2 listings with pets. But I think you're right. This provokes so many questions, and they're not necessarily straightforward. I think it's one where it's quite important to just take a little bit of half a step back as a host or as a property manager, and go, right, okay, what am I really trying to achieve? What am I in this industry for? What are my goals, and what's my appetite to risk? And on the basis of that, just to have a plan. I think the most important piece of advice for anyone hosting is to say, right, I need a plan, and that's going to involve some insurance somewhere. It's going to involve some communication. It's going to involve some agreements that guests need to sign with me. And a really important part of that plan is having some sort of approach to how you're going to deal with smaller losses, because these are the things that really, really, really hurt property managers. They really hurt insurers as well. Like, like insurers never like claims for, $200, $300, $400, regardless of where the deductible is, because in many senses they take just as much kind of time and work as a £1,000 or £2,000 dollar claim. So the issues we see with pets is we see people coming with pets who said they aren't going to have pets. I imagine, Heather, that may have happened in your time. And in that sort of circumstance, we would really act very hard on behalf of the homeowner, in terms of trying to hold the guest accountable for whatever damage has been caused. I think it's very different from the position where you say, absolutely, you're very welcome to come and stay in my house with your horse and your pet cow and your whatever else you might have, which clearly is an exaggeration. But if someone was coming to stay in your house with those animals, you need to expect some damage, right? Those animals are going to create some damage. A dog is the same. It's just a smaller little bit of damage that you should expect to happen. I think it's a really important message for homeowners everywhere, frankly, considering short-term rentals, is you need to expect wear and tear, and you need to expect it to happen quicker than when you're using your house just yourself, because you've got this high turnover, you've got more people, you've got people having fun, you've got animals that don't know their way around, and damage does get caused. And yeah, some sort of plan for the kind of naught to $250, $500, $1,000, whatever it is that your risk appetite is, which is likely to coincide probably somewhere along the line with a deductible on an insurance policy. You need to think about something for that. Now, I agree with what Nick said earlier, that old-fashioned deposits where people are actually physically making payments it's amazing how much they still happen. They're so antiquated. They provide so much friction to a booking journey. Guests hate them, and they also cost a lot. They cost a huge amount now. If you're operating at scale and you're taking a whole load of transactions in different currencies and holding that money and then paying it back. So a damage waiver, and it's something we're really heavily involved in as an alternative, where a guest pays a one-off non-refundable fee, which waives their liability for a certain amount of damage. Sort of $500 would be a pretty typical amount. It is a great way of doing that. And I think most guests, if you ask them, would rather pay a one-off $30, $40 than have to pay out $500 and hope they're going to get it back at some stage in the future.
I just want to quickly ask a question there. I mean, you mentioned it's a little extreme to talk about cows and horses, but this raises kind of pivots to an interesting topic, which I see all the time in the forums, is the struggle of emotional support animals, and especially with properties that say they don't accept pets. Now, how does that fall under an insurance policy if your agreement is you don't accept pets, but yet there is this almost unwritten requirement that you are to allow emotional support animals? I know this is a hot topic and has many different angles to it. I'll put this to you, Heather, to where this question is going to go.
Yeah, not sure I really want to get into this one, but
I could happily provide some input, because just kind of to Andrew's point, in the back of my mind about the horses and cows, I'm kind of chuckling because, we kind of have this internal joke about a claim about the three little piggies, and they weren't necessarily small pigs, but emotional support animal. To your point, Mike, where guests had three pigs and they more or less ransacked this house. And what we find on our side, especially around the ESA question, is a lot of other insurance products, even other insurance products that are defining occupancy for short-term or mid-term stays, that they're not covering animal or pet liabilities, or they're not covering animal or pet damages. Now, in any regard, almost nearly no insurance policy is going to cover secretions from an animal. So even if you are pet friendly or not pet friendly and somebody's dog pees on the rug, like, very few companies and maybe some supplemental companies might respond to that, but like, you're not going to call proper if you're one of our clients because a dog peed on your, $1,500 rug and you have to get it replaced. That's just not going to happen. But somebody locks a dog in the master bedroom and now that dog has, eaten through the mattress and has really ripped up the carpet and chewed through the door and things like that. That's where the combination of supplemental products that don't have limitations around animals and pets, as well as a home, annual home insurance policy that doesn't exclude that type of stuff, is going to be a big benefit. The pet equation is growing. There's an entire OTA out there specific to pet friendly properties called Bring Fido. And so as pet friendly properties and especially midterm rentals, traveling professionals bringing their pets, that's where, we kind of get back to the basis of building your foundation in these pillars. That's the question you have to ask. I'm going to be a pet friendly property. I need no limitations around animal and pet liability or potential damages to my home that are not the standard wear and tear, to what Andrew alluded to as well, because nobody's going to cover wear and tear.
Yeah, great point. I want to come over to Noga and just throw it over to the travel insurance side, because this, once again, it's about setting up your guest for the best possible vacation, isn't it? And having that cover, which I believe is an additional cover for your pets. I mean, I would jump at that because in fact, down where I am down here in Gulf Shores, a local pet owner had their dog got bitten by a cottonmouth snake and took a great chunk out of its cheek. That was nearly $4,500 worth of vet fees, and they said at the time, we didn't have insurance. We should have had insurance. So how could you encourage guests to purchase that when they're bringing their dogs? Because we know what pet owners are like. They are very responsive to anything that's going to protect their animals.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, not all travel insurance would provide pet care. We do have a pet care add-on. So in addition to the standard policy that covers, your health, your trip investment, etc., we have add-ons, and two of them that are applicable here is pet care. So that's basically veterinary expenses. It also covers kenneling costs if you left them and you have to stay later, like you get stuck at your destination and now you need to pay an extra day for the kenneling. So that's not relevant here, but that's kind of a pet care add-on that we have. It's one in and of itself. And just like humans, we go out of state and we are not covered necessarily with medical insurance. That's one thing that people don't always think about, unfortunately, until you've had that situation. And pets are the same. So you're out of town, you need a vet. Just like you said, Heather, it can be a really expensive addition to your trip that you didn't plan on. So pet care is something that we can offer. We have a lot of different abilities to kind of integrate differently. So let's say you are a pet friendly vacation rental, that maybe is something that we highlight to the guests at the time of offering the insurance. And in addition to that, we have vacation rental damage protection. Again, it's an add-on, so we're not like super hug that this is something that you can purchase standalone as a traveler. But if you want that extra protection, you're traveling with your young kids and sometimes they like to draw on the walls or what have you. It might be a good idea to buy that extra protection. So we have both of those. We find that obviously people traveling with pets, families, the occasional, bachelorette party, those are all times where it might be really relevant to get some extra protection as a traveler. From the property manager perspective, these are just things that you might want to highlight in a certain way, depending on, your audience and who your guests typically are.
Andrew?
Yeah, I was just gonna the whole pet thing, like again, taking it up a level maybe. If you are a property manager or a host and you want to be able to accept pets, we see so many examples when people they just haven't made a plan, they haven't thought through the consequences of that. They have an apartment or a house which is carpeted everywhere, for example, and they haven't kind of thought about the fact that animals are going to damage your carpet. And maybe a house is just not appropriate for pets. So actually, to think really hard about if you want to accept people with pets, which is a great idea, then make sure your apartment or your house is fitted out appropriately. And it's also fair to think actually as part of that plan, you're coming with your three pigs, or we had a case I think where a single traveler on their own had 7 or 8 dogs that just created havoc. Like if that's happening, you want to be taking some sort of fairly large financial hold on that person before they come, because damage is going to happen, and it should just be part of your plan, because you have no chance of then going to your insurer, or little chance, sorry, of then saying, I accepted someone to come with 7 dogs in my house and they made a bit of a mess. Can I have some money, please? It just, life doesn't work like that. It's one of those cases where just turning on a little bit of logic and making that kind of, right, what's my plan? What do I want the outcome to be for this booking? I want everyone to be happy at the end of this booking, including me. And so that means I need some plan to deal with the fact that these guys are going to make some mess.
To kind of cap this out a little bit, I'm a sucker for data, and when we're talking about pet-friendly properties, U.S. specifically is where this data is from. In the insurance world, from a liability perspective, 1 out of 5 liability claims in the United States is a dog bite. It's about $1 billion in settlements annually, and average settlement in the U.S. is about $63,000. So if you're going to be pet friendly, that's where it comes increasingly important to make sure you don't have limitations around that. Because $63,000, that's a tough pill to swallow if you don't have the right coverage. That could be your entire revenue net for a whole year just to settle that if you're going to be a pet-friendly property. So just a little bit of numbers for everybody to think about if you're thinking, I'm going to be pet-friendly, and what does this risk look like? 1 out of 5 liability claims, $1 billion a year, $63,000 on average in the U.S.
So what happens, Nick, if a guest comes to a property with dogs, and the dog gets loose and runs off and bites a neighbor?
Yeah, so this is a very fresh situation in our book of business right now, as of October of 23. So definitely a pet-friendly property, perfectly fine. Family brought 3 dogs, fenced backyard, and they left the dogs in the backyard and went out and about their day. And what ended up happening was dogs are in an unfamiliar area. They're getting rambunctious. They're outside unattended. They dug underneath the fence and got into the neighbor's yard. And the neighbor went out there to try and corral the dogs. Supposedly 2 of them ran off, but one of them stayed there and bit that homeowner, the neighbor. The neighbor was able to corral the dog into their garage to keep them contained. And then, of course, their first phone call was to animal control. Animal control shows up with law enforcement, a police officer, and then that police officer was bit as well. Unfortunately, at that point in time, and I mean, this is wide scope craziness, but that dog had to be put down. And so from a liability perspective, as well as a guest experience perspective, we have a lot of negative things going on in this particular situation. So not only do we have a law enforcement officer who is now injured and unable to do their duties of work, perhaps there's work compensation insurance from, being on the police department, but there's also the city could now come over after the property owner and the guest in this situation. The neighbor is 100% suing the property owner that we insure and the owner of the dogs. And another component to this is that it's off property line. So most insurances are going to cover your premises only. They're not going to extend coverage away from your property. And that's where, you know, in our book of business, the commercial component that we provide is a benefit. So we have this off-premises claim. We're defending the property owner against the loss. If they do get sued by the city, we're defending that as well, up to our $1 million limit. And so it's just it's a terrible situation all around, but the shining light to all of this is the property owner understood their risk. They did their research. They got the right risk management and plan for the one-off situation. So probably never happen to them ever again in their entire life as a host. But this one case, without having the right cover, could be a make or break deal on your business moving forward.
It was interesting right at the very beginning of Stir Crazy month when we did the safety panel, and it's something that Humphrey Bowles said on that panel was about just do one thing. If you just do one thing, and that was, you know, talking about safety, but taking from what you just said, Nick, you know, just do that one thing and make sure that you've got the right cover for what you want to do. I mean, we talked sort of fairly extensively about pets because, as you 63, I think 64% of US households have a pet. It is massive, massive. And, you know, as pets, you know, it is horses, it's pigs, I mean, we did have a request for pot-bellied pigs to come to one of our properties, and we declined, and they argued the case, but we did not have that. But yeah, I mean, you can have the emotional support horse now on a plane, so it's a major issue across the board. Well, not so much an issue. It's a topic that needs to be discussed. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts on that whole pet side. Mike, do you want to bring in some questions now?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's throw it over to some of the questions. We've had some great questions here from the audience. If I can just find them.
I've got them.
Yeah, they are. You got them. Yeah, they're all in the answer section. So I mean, so a very common one, and this, and we'll go to all three of you on this, is what areas do you serve? So let's start with Nick. So Nick, with Proper Insurance, what I mean, do you serve outside of the US, or does Proper Insurance only just cover US based businesses?
Yeah, so at this time, Proper is just US based businesses, not including connected US territories. We're unable to do that at this point. It's just the way the regulatory bodies work with where your company is domiciled. There are solutions out there for non-US based properties. Our other company, because we do have three companies, we have the property manager side. Proper obviously is going to be the homeowner side, and then we also do a damage waiver product similar to SuperHog. The damage waiver product that we provide is international. I think it's available in like 27 countries now. So there is some solution there to get yourself maybe some supplemental coverage through that aspect to kind of broaden your scope of protection, depending on what your local markets are offering for this space.
Okay.
Yeah, Robert's question about does Proper Insurance have solutions for Canadian properties? We found, as a property management company in Canada, it was really tough finding insurers that were willing to provide policies for short-term rentals, and I think it will be something that will be addressed at the Can Stays Rental Alliance conference in April, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, and I will throw that answer over to that question over to Andrew as well. And obviously, SuperHog is UK based, and SuperHog, as I was reminded on Trust Week with Humphrey, is that SuperHog doesn't provide insurance, but you guys do have a lot of other solutions, and also GuardHog as well. So what areas, what geographical areas do you guys cover?
So we work with hosts and property managers truly globally. So anywhere you could or would want to travel, we work. So we have hosts and property managers in 30, 40, 50 odd countries, but we have literally no limit to where we can work. As you said, we own an insurance business, so we have an insurance business within our group, but we are not a replacement for homeowners or home type insurance. So one of the really important steps, I'd say that the just do one thing, if you're listening, is to at the very least talk to your homeowners insurer and make sure they know what it is that you are doing. So, you know, we sometimes let out our spare room on Airbnb or something and make sure they're comfortable with it. Our risk management toolkit works alongside people's insurance products to help them know that the guests who are coming to stay with them are the guests who they say they are, and to do a bit of background screening in terms of what their profile's like, what behavioral analytics we can tell you about them, what their profile's like on other platforms and behavior. And then because we have our own insurance business, we can provide guarantees and help you where guests do end up causing property damage. Not liability, but property damage.
And Noga?
So we are insuring American travelers. But again, coming from the property management side, obviously you can be located anywhere. So if you have a property that has Americans traveling to it, they could be something that you offer. Travel insurance, just like all insurance, is highly regulated. So depending on your location, you'll always have different options of travel insurers. For us specifically, it's the US, and obviously the travelers themselves can be going internationally.
Okay, that's great.
Perfect. So we've got a couple of this. Well, I don't know. I think this is a simple answer. But the question is, can I offer a bottle of wine to my guests, you know, as a gift when they arrive? Who wants to jump on that one?
Yeah, liquor liability coverage language comes in all shapes and sizes. So when you're dealing with a property owner who doesn't have a commercial level policy, I would highly, 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 highly recommend against doing that at their location. If they do have a commercial policy, then you need to get the full coverage and go specifically to the liquor liability exclusion or limitation and see what it states. And there's a bunch of different form languages in a commercial product that's covering the home annually about it. Some of them say that flat out say you can't serve any alcohol, and any alcohol related incident is just not going to be covered. Some of them say that contributing to the intoxication of somebody at the property is not covered. And then some of them just say, as long as you aren't required to have a license to furnish, you're fine. We take the approach of the third. As long as you're not required to have a license to furnish alcohol, we will cover a liquor liability claim. But that is where, as a manager or a host, that's something you really need to dig deep into and make sure you're understanding that on your policy if you're going to gift any amount of alcohol in any capacity to your guests as part of the stay.
What about food products, Nick? What about, you know, because I used to find, if I found out from my guests that came to my property that they were gluten-free, I would I made gluten-free cookies, and they were very, very good. And I would leave them for my guests.
Yeah.
I'm not, and that was way, way back. I'm talking about 15 years ago. So is that something that perhaps is a no-no as well now?
So that is specific to internal underwriting in a lot of cases. You don't really see policies out there that have limitations around baked products and any liability. Now, you do run into the occasional foodborne illness exclusions, which would obviously be problematic in the situation that you got sued for that because you sprinkled a little bit of gluten in there and now they're ill, right? So one thing that we specifically underwrite against is people baking goods. If you're baking goods for your property owner, we're going to ask you explicitly, or I'm sorry, your guest, we're going to ask you explicitly to cease doing that. So we don't have to deal with a foodborne illness liability case because they're nearly indefensible.
Right.
So
Good,
we
good
allow,
point.
yeah, we allow prepackaged goods. So if you're doing gluten-free bagels or you went and bought from the store gluten-free cookies, you know, dairy-free products or whatever for your guests, because of that, that's fine, pending that they're prepackaged goods from a separate manufacturer. Because now, if they mess up in that prepackaged good, the liability is on them, not on you, and that provides a level of defensibility for the insurance carrier.
It's really sad, Heather. I'd much rather have your home-baked goods.
They were really, really good.
and the bottle of wine, frankly, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a shame we find ourselves in this position, I guess.
I guess it's one of those challenges too, Scott. I mean, we've been talking to a lot of people recently about local partnerships, is partnering with, local cheese company or a local winery or a local, shop, people who do charcuterie boards. And, you can have that as an added service that, when guests arrive, that's there and available. But I guess, I mean, would that, if you're providing from an outside company, but you're providing the service to have it in the property, and I know this gets very convoluted because we can go down a big rabbit hole here, but how does that translate, Nick?
It's nuanced for sure. So and again, back to just our internal underwriting and how we handle it, because our main goal here with every property manager and host that we do business with is providing the utmost level of defensibility for you that we possibly can in the event of a situation. So you can partner with local businesses around your area, and to keep it simple, you want to make sure that transactionally the guests are paying them directly, because you can get into a potential position of negligence if you're the one managing that transaction for them and then paying the third party. And I know that it's like, well, it's just easier if they just pay me and then I just, pay them. It's like, no, you can be the broker of connection, if you will, and say, look, here's a lot of cool things you can do and have pre-set up at your property. You want to rent a boat from the marina, I'll connect you with so-and-so. They'll give you a discount. If you want to buy, a bottle of wine, charcuterie board, you want, these pre-made meals from XYZ restaurant, they do a partnership with me and they give you a discount. Then you want to facilitate that so that the transaction's going through them directly versus you managing that to absolve a liability as much as possible.
And as a minimum, I'd say just to not do that deal with your next door neighbor who's a great baker or a great guide. Clearly work with professionals, be professional. The whole of short-term rentals, and I guess part of the reason why conversations like this are now happening, has professionalized and has got a long way to go still. But a really core message is set yourself up to be professional and only work with other professionals. And being professional means something like they are an entity and they are insured themselves. I mean, that's a good start. Only work with like professional partners who are insured themselves.
Say it louder for the people in the back, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those are such great points. I want to come to a question that Jennifer asked, because this was very pertinent to us with our company, because we had a 200 properties, and I think all but one had their own waterfront. It was all private waterfront, and every one of them just about had a dock. And Jennifer's question is, what if I have a dock at my waterfront and the guest gets hurt on it?
Yeah, so this translates, this is where you can get some overlap between Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 with the home insurance and the supplemental products that might offer liability extensions. So, if it's on property, the kind of draw that line between premises liability and, off premises. If it's on your property, it's your own private pond with a dock. A lot of other companies are going to end up covering that particular risk. Hopefully they underwrite and charge for it accordingly. If that dock is extending into a public lake and that guest is injured in the public waterfront, lesser than coverages might deny the claim because it's off property line. So it's important to make sure that that's where, again, these commercial products and the commercial supplemental insurance comes into play, because they extend off premises. So really it's about double checking and making sure that that coverage is contained in the policy, or in most cases just not excluded. There's just not an exclusion for waterfront liability. Recreational activity liability exclusions are becoming common, which are scary, and so on and so forth. And Andrew, let you kind of chime in on that on the supplemental side as well.
I mean, I guess I'm a big fan of making it clear to guests what they can and can't do as well. House rules. I like getting house rules and guest agreements signed by guests. I know particularly in the US is probably still a little bit more litigious than Europe and the UK, but and that's not necessarily going to help you, but waivers, for example. So a lot of hosts in the UK have guests sign waivers if they have swimming pools, and I guess similar to a dock that basically says if you go swimming and you are intoxicated, it's pretty tough to come and blame me for anything that happens. So I think real clarity around rules around usage of a property, what can and can't happen, are really helpful.
So I think
Mike.
we got time for just one more question just before we wrap up. And again, thanks so much everybody for sharing their time with us today. We've got one last question here from Robert. How does insurance cover an accident where the guests neglected to lock up the property and the place was robbed and or damaged by thieves?
Yeah, so I can definitely attune on our supplemental product that we have through one of our companies. The coverage is only available for damage like that. Well, it's damage caused by a guest, malicious or accidental, during the time of the booking. So when they've checked out, that cover is no longer there. So that's where your home policy really comes into play. Unfortunately, a lot of retail insurance markets have language around locking of the property during vacancy. And if the property is not locked, you may have reductions or total exclusions in coverage for robberies because your property wasn't secured. With our product specifically for U.S. homeowners, we're not going to have that type of language in the policy, especially if it can be attributed to, I guess, not locking the property. And maybe you have Ring doorbell cameras or something and can show they exited the property with their luggage, and then 15, 20 minutes later, before my cleaning team even arrived, somebody walked in and walked out with couches and TVs and stuff like that. So again, it's just important to, be asking those specific questions to your agent, if not even higher up to the actual underwriter, and phrasing that question in an email so you can get it in writing, knowing that they are in fact going to cover or not cover that particular situation.
This is
another.
go on.
Sorry, Heather. A really similar example that we've seen many times is where a guest maybe doesn't know how to shut a window. They struggle to shut a window, and there's a storm, and there's a load of flooding that happens that would not have happened had the homeowner been there, because they know how to shut that slightly awkward window. So yeah, that's absolutely the kind of case where we financially help out hosts to reinstate them.
I think we've covered a lot today, and it's really gone to show how broad this whole insurance topic is, and it really doesn't, from my perspective, doesn't receive anywhere near as much attention as it should. And I'm sure from my panelists' perception, that's probably very, very true. We will continue to be broadcasting the importance of insurance as a responsibility of hosts and managers, and educating guests about travel insurance and the importance of having themselves covered as well, to make their dream vacations the best possible. I'm going to hand it over to Mike to wrap up and do a thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you to Nick and Noga and Andrew, and your incredible support for not only just attending today, but also your teams who have been out promoting this panel and the whole of STIR Crazy Month. Again, big thank you to Proper Insurance, Nick Massey's company, who have been really stepped up to help promote this entire month, which really helps us reach a wider audience to get these really key topics in front of everybody, just to try and make them more of a priority for both property management companies as well as individual property owners. Thank you to all of our attendees today, to Jennifer and Kate and Kristen, Lisa and Robert and Tatum, who have managed to stay through all the way to the end. We got some great thumbs up, 5 out of 5s across the board from everybody for this panel. We'll be dicing this up and sharing out on social media to help promote the importance of doing that one thing, which is to check your own policy, connect with your insurance company, make sure you're covered, and look at the supplemental coverage that you can get from great companies like Proper Insurance, like Superhog, and also the services that you can provide from companies like Faye. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to the panelists, and we'll see you next week for regulations, where we'll be talking about the challenges we are facing across the board around the world, with governments, municipalities looking to increased regulations and legislation, which makes our industry that much more challenging, and how you can get out in front of it and be a part of the solution and not just complain about the problem. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.